Here we're going to look at how to make it a line graph in Excel. So remember, we use line graphs if we have two quantitative variables that we want to compare, or two variables that are both sets of numbers. And the most common example of that would be something like change over time. So here we have days and we have a height that goes with each of those days. We were measuring the height or the growth of plants over a number of days. Now, data can be entered into Excel in one of two different ways for this type of graph. You can either enter it into columns, which go up and down, and you want your data that you want to go on your x-axis, which if you have time would probably be that, to come first, and then the numbers that come with it will be the column after that. Or you can do it horizontally with the days coming first, or your x-axis data coming first, and the numbers that come with it coming below it. Now, to make this graph, and this will come out exactly the same using either of these, sometimes Excel likes this format a little better with the horizontal. It can get a little confused at times with some of the other ones, so that's why I show you that. So in order to make a line graph, we are simply going to highlight our data. We're actually not going to use the line graph option in Excel. The reason for that is it simply takes the data and it connects them with a line. And you'll notice that it also is making a line. It's making two lines here. We only want one line. We want a line that's the data points of the intersection of all of those. So where we actually want that is a scatter plot. Now you can do a scatter plot that just has the dots, or you can do a scatter plot that has the lines connecting them. I'm going to do one with just the dots here, and I'll show you why in just a minute. So we're going to add that. We would add a chart title just like we would with any other chart. It would describe what we're testing and what about what we tested and what we did to it when we tested. So maybe this is the growth of plants. So what we were testing was the plants. What about them we were testing was the growth. And what we did to it when given fertilizer. And then we need to add our axes titles, just like always. So this would be the days that it was growing for, and maybe this is our height in centimeters of our plant. Now, if we want a line here, we could have chosen that option before. We can always go back and say change chart and say we want to add those lines to it. We could go and we could change to that. But typically we want a line of best fit, or what Excel calls a trend line. So if we go down and just where we added our axes titles, and that menu again also shows up here in the top left corner, we can say to add a trend line. Now notice when we look at that line, it's a straight line. Most of the points fall pretty close to it, but not all of them are exactly on it. And that's because we have some error in our measurement. So a trend line is best for showing, or a line of best fit is best for showing the trends in our data. And that's what we're typically going to use. Now, one other thing to point out about trend lines is they're not always a straight line. We don't always have linear trend lines. So we can see they give you some options here, and you can kind of click on them and they'll start to look at what they do. If you also click more options for our trend line and click on the little bars here, it'll show you kind of the general shape of each of those. And say you could add one of those, and if you look at one and see that one of those other types seems to fit the data a little bit better, like more of the points are closer to it, you might want to select those ones. But typically in this class we'll have linear trend lines. Every once in a while we may have a exponential or a logarithmic trend line. So those are our options here. If you have a trend line and you want to get rid of it, simply click on it and click delete and it will get rid of it. And that's our simple line graph. One other thing that you might want to notice is with these line graphs, and this is true with any graph, if you change some of your data, your original data, so say I noticed my plant actually spiked up to 50 centimeters at the end, and I put that in, it automatically changes my graph. I don't have to go remake the whole graph. Once it has the data and it knows which cells in Excel it's taking it from, you can change it and it will update the graph. Another thing is when you click on the graph, it will have highlighted the data that it's coming from. And with a line graph, it will highlight in purple the numbers that are going on the x-axis and in blue the numbers that are going on the y-axis. Now that's going to be helpful when we get to our multi-line graphs a little bit later.